Kelly here, and today I want to talk about my most recent reads. I have, I believe, 4 books to talk to you about today, and a couple of them I listen to audiobooks. I have 1 physical book and 1 ebook. So I'm going to start from the book I like the least to the one I like the best. The first book I want to talk about is Lifelike by Jay Kristoff, and I read this as an ebook, and I gave it 3 stars. It's a really hard plot to describe. It's a futuristic society where there is a lot of artificial intelligence and robots, and this girl Eve that we're following. At the beginning we find out she is somebody that like fights in a war dome, like between 2 robots. Like she runs one robot and she fights against another kind of robot, and we get to know her grandpa and her best friend, and she has a dog that's a robot and another friend that's a robot. So yeah, there's just a lot of like AI and fighting between different groups of people and all that. It's very hard to describe, so I'm not going to. It's just futuristic sci-fi, I'll say that. And you can read more about it online because I can't describe it any better than that. And the thing with Jay Kristoff is he's a very like stylized type of writing. And I had the same problem when I was reading Nevernight, that it took me like half of the book to get into his writing style, but then I was like absorbed in the characters and absorbed in the plot and was excited to finish. But this one, it took me a long time to get into his writing style because he uses a lot of that futuristic kind of slang. Like he creates his own slang that would naturally happen in real life, but it was hard to like get into it. And then I never really connected to the characters, where at least in Nevernight I really enjoyed the characters, so that kept me invested. In this one, I could care less what happened to these characters, so it was 2 stars for me, the majority of the book. But I have to tell you, Jay Kristoff can write an ending and surprise me, and I have to give him credit for that. So I bumped it up to 3 stars because I thought the last like 20% of the book was really good, and I liked the things that came up and the surprises. Obviously I'm not going to tell you what they are, but it wasn't enough to make up for the first like 80% where I just wasn't really invested at all in the story. So I'm not going to continue the series, but I can understand why a lot of people like it, because there is some fun surprises and things that pop up. His writing is just not necessarily for me, so I'm not going to continue with the series. The next book I listened to was The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker, and I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. It's not one I loved, but it wasn't like horrible either. It was just kind of in the middle, maybe a little bit above average for me. And this book is kind of like a romance, but that has a lot more like deeper plot and things going on besides just the romance. So it's about a woman who, of course I can't remember her name right now, but she ends up going to Alaska to see her father, who she has been estranged from for like 14 years, for the past 14 years since she was like a child. And while in Alaska, she's dealing with, you know, getting to know her dad again and living in this like middle of nowhere, because the area of Alaska there is really the wilderness. And then there's a man that she's kind of having like a hate to love relationship with. So yeah, all those things are happening. And I did really like the plot that was like her and her dad developing a relationship again, and the reason why she had to go to Alaska and kind of their relationship. All that I really enjoyed. I thought the romance was just kind of average. I am not the type of person that likes that like uber masculine type in a romance, like the kind of guy that once they, you know, he's really mean to her for the first like half of the book, and then we find out he's got, you know, the heart of gold, and then like when they are starting to get together, he's like kind of like not demanding, but you know what I mean, like the demanding that's supposed to be sexy, like, oh, get on the bed now, you know, that kind of sexiness. I'm just not into that. I know a lot of people are into that like really masculine type, and that's something they're attracted to. So if you like that, this is the kind of book that's like the hate to love, where he's like the super masculine guy. If you're into that, great. I'm just not into that, so the romance was just kind of like eh for me. I didn't really like love the romance. I more liked the family plot line and the character growth of our main character. She starts out like really self-centered and materialistic, and kind of just grows in her adventure of being in the wilderness. So that part I liked. Romance was just kind of blah for me. The thing that kind of bothered me, I can't really tell you specifically because it's towards the end. So I'll put up like a spoiler warning. It's not like a full-on spoiler, but if you don't want to find out anything about why she's in Alaska, you might want to skip this section, but I'm not going to completely spoil it. But I will put a spoiler warning until I'm done talking about this. So one of the things that bothered me was that her dad, part of the reason she's going to Alaska is her father has cancer, and like there's a lot of talk about cancer towards the end of this book, and I didn't really like the way the author, I mean it might not have been the author, it might have just been a character, but I felt like a lot of the characters, the way they were approaching cancer and the way they were like dealing with her dad and his choices in his cancer treatment really bothered me. And as somebody who just recently had somebody who died of cancer who made similar choices to her father, that whole plot towards the end really bothered me, and I didn't like the way his choices were treated, so that lowered down the star rating for me too. That's the end of the spoilers. But yeah, so I thought this was a fine book. A lot of people love it on Goodreads, but I feel like those people, a lot of them are probably already romance readers. I'm not the hugest romance reader. I just thought this sounded like it had a lot of other stuff going on, but the romance was like a huge plot line, and I just don't like that kind of like masculine romance, so that's it for me. The next book I read was like my only physical book for the last like several weeks, and that was The Lake House by Kate Morton. And I was buddy reading this with Tia from Tia and All the Books, and we both really enjoyed this book. I think she gave it a 5-star, and I gave it 4 stars. I found it really enjoyable and entertaining and intriguing the whole time. And this is kind of like a multi-generational story about this family whose son goes missing back in like the 1930s, and then we're like 70 or 80 years later, I can't remember, 70 years later, and the sister of the boy who goes missing we're kind of following her as she's like in her 80s or whatever, and then this detective that is in the 2000s who has decided to reopen the case, so she's meeting with the sister and trying to figure out what happened to this boy that disappeared 70 years ago. So because of that, you know, we're jumping back and forth in time, we're following a lot of perspectives, so this is a really like interwoven plot, which a lot of people don't like, so just know that going in. We're following about 6 different perspectives throughout this whole book, and at least 4 timelines probably pop up, so it goes back and forth a lot if that's not for you. I didn't get confused. I felt involved in like what was going to happen, and she kept surprising me. I would like make a prediction and then be like, oh no, that's not right, and then I would make another prediction and that proved wrong. So she did keep me on my toes. Ultimately, I didn't give it a full 5 stars because I thought that the ending was a little too neatly wrapped up, because there were so many different plot lines open that in the end it like everything solved perfectly, you know, kind of thing. And that I'm not necessarily one that wants to have everything connect into this perfect little bow. And so I didn't give it a full 5 stars, but I would read another one of her books. I did enjoy the way she was writing and the experience of reading this, especially buddy reading this with Tia. The last book I listened to was Royals by Rachel Hawkins. And I'm putting up the cover for Royals because I listened to the audiobook, and the audiobook is done as Royals, the old cover, but a lot of you might have seen this book as Prince Charming, so it's renamed and has a new cover, and I actually wasn't interested in reading the book until I saw this new cover, and I really liked the new cover, but I wanted to listen to it, and it turns out when you listen to it, it's called Royals. So if you're searching for the audiobook version of Prince Charming, it is called Royals. And this is a really fun book. I gave it 5 stars because it was everything I wanted. I just wanted a fluffy, fun romance that involved like being in Scotland, and that is exactly what I got, and I had no issues whatsoever with it, and so I gave it 5 stars because it was what it was supposed to be. So this is just basically about a girl named Daisy, and her sister is engaged to the Prince of Scotland, and so she is sent to Scotland to kind of get to know the royal family and kind of like teach her how to interact with royals so that she doesn't make mistakes that the paparazzi is gonna catch and stuff like that. And while she's there, there's a little romance that ensues, and I just thought the romance was super cute. I loved her and her love interest together. They were a lot of fun. It was like one of those books that I was so invested in, like loving their relationship, that I stayed up till like 3 o'clock in the morning to finish the book, which I should not be doing because my kids get up at like 7, but I just couldn't put it down. I was loving it so much, so that's why I had to give it 5 stars, because I was just really enjoying it. The narrator is really good. Her name is Amanda Lee Cobb, and she does like all the accents. So there's English accents and Scottish accents and American accents, and I just like the way she did it all together. I loved being in like Scotland and like hearing about the different like mansions that the royalty in or rich people or elite in Scotland are living in, and also just like the ambiance and all that. It was great. And especially because at the time I was reading this, part of the reason I picked it up was because I knew it took place in Scotland, and at the time I was reading, like, the majority of my family on my husband's side is in Scotland. They're still in Scotland, but they were there while I was reading it, and we were supposed to be on that trip, but because we decided to buy a house this year, we had to like bail out on the Scotland trip. And so like seeing pictures that they're sending me of them being in Scotland and all the scenery, and they're actually staying in this house that looks just like some of the noble houses that they talk about in the book. So it was kind of like my way of vicariously feeling like I'm being in Scotland while my whole family, like my sister-in-laws and my brother-in-law, my nephews and my father-in-law and his husband, and everybody is in Scotland without me. I got to like feel like I got a little bit of Scottish flavor from this book. I would highly recommend it if you just want a fun, fluffy romance. And I'm really excited to read the next book, since the next book involves a female-female romance and is like a companion novel in this series. So that's it. That is all of the books that I have read recently. If you want to talk about any of these, I'd love to chat in the comments. Thanks. Bye.